Hello and welcome. My name is Ed Reed and I'm Head of Training here at Cornwall Insight. Today I am joined by my colleagues Emma Bill and Kate Morley, both analysts in our regulation team. And today the three of us are going to be discussing the Ofgem programme for faster switching and elements of the Retail Energy Code which underpin the rules for that programme of work. And the reason we're discussing this topic at the moment is it's been a long-running programme of work, but now coming to the business end of this work stream as the hard work is beginning to be codified in the Retail Energy Code. And before we begin though, I just thought I'd let you know that our next edition of our faster switching service will be issued towards the end of February, and we'll provide a little more detail of that towards the end of the session. So I think first of all, I'll turn my attention to Kate. Hi Kate, how are you doing?
Hiya, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, all good. So I mean, before we get into too much of the detail, I guess it'd be, well, I suppose we should ask ourselves the question, what is the faster, more reliable switching program?
Yeah, so it's one of Ofgem's key work streams, and it aims to enable faster and more reliable switching. And it's thought that this will encourage energy customers to switch because it will allow them to access cheaper tariffs more quickly and also increase their confidence with the switching process. And this also has the potential to increase competition among suppliers as well as innovation, which could also result in consumer benefits. And the overall goal of the programme is to reduce switching timescales so that after initiating a switch, a domestic consumer can be with their chosen supplier by midnight of the next working day, with an extra 24 hours built in for non-domestic consumers, which provides the losing supplier with a slightly longer obligations period.
Yeah, okay. So then there's obviously some kind of work that Ofgem's done to sort of try and validate some of these benefits, I guess. Is there any intel on that?
Yes, so they have done an impact assessment. So that considered 3 different scenarios, and that kind of looked at how this could increase switching. So the third scenario assumed that the programme would see a 15% increase in switching rates in the first year above the baseline, an increase of 5% for years 2 and 3, and 3% for remaining years. But it also showed that it can improve the reliability of switching as well, and is expected to reduce erroneous transfers by around a third, with reductions in failed switches as well.
Okay, so there's obviously the potential for some quite significant customer benefits here, and I guess for the industry as well, certainly reducing erroneous transfers and failed switches. I guess there's going to be quite a kind of infrastructure or system change required to allow this to happen.
Yes, definitely. So the switching process will be handled through a new central switching service, which will be a change. So that will replace the existing gas and electricity switching services that are in place at the moment, and that will be run by the Data Communications Company, or DCC. And under the new arrangement as well, switches will be supplier initiated, which will be a change for the gas industry because currently these are shipper led.
Okay, so yes, of course, and I guess we've had the retail market as we kind of see it today for around, well, at least 20 years, I guess, and yes, there's been incremental change to switching, but there's always been quite separate processes for gas and electricity. So that'd be interesting to bring together and make it a truly kind of dual fuel switching process, I guess. So given all that hard work that's gone on to sort of define what the benefits are and set out what's required, I guess it'd be interesting to know, where are we at the moment?
Okay, yeah. So the go live of this faster switching program was originally planned for the end of last year. It was then pushed back to mid 2021, and it's now been delayed further to mid 2022, which was due to COVID-19 and kind of a 6-month relief period that was put into place for that. And following that 6-month relief period, Ofgem carried out a full plan review with the final kind of issue of that in autumn last year. And this set out a timeline of steps for the programme parties to follow going forward. And they are required to make sure that their plans are aligned with these updated plans. And part of that is the user entry process testing, which is due to start in May of this year. And this is a testing phase that requires the parties to run a kind of defined series of tests to demonstrate that their systems can connect to the central switching service, but also to demonstrate that they can act as users of the new switching arrangements as well.
So that's interesting. So it is getting towards the business end, I guess. Is there anything to say around the kind of governance then, the need to sort of change the rule book or update the rule book, create a new rule book, as in the retail energy code?
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, Ed, the Retail Energy Code is a new dual fuel code for suppliers, which will kind of govern and underpin the new switching arrangements when they go live in 2022. So coming up sort of in the pipeline is the transfer of different services into that code, and that is also known as retail code consolidation. So we've seen the REC kind of evolve over time. So version 1 of the REC or Retail Energy Code was designated on the 1st of February 2019. And this sets out the transitional requirements for the code parties. So this includes things like governance, performance assurance, and change management, and essentially acts as a guide for the parties as the new switching arrangements are developed. And then we've also got the interim version 1.1, which recently came into force. And this kind of further develops those governance and kind of performance assurance arrangements for the REC, as well as the transfer of the management of energy theft related schemes, which will kind of be transferred into the REC in April of this year. So that includes things like the theft risk assessment service, or the TRAS as it's probably better known, and also the energy theft tip-off service as well. And then we've also got REC version 2 and retail code consolidation, which are due to go live on the 1st of September this year. So that will bring together content from the Master Registration Agreement, or MRA, for electricity, and the Supply Point Administration Agreement, or SPA, for gas, into the REC, but also other retail code provisions as well. So things like the Green Deal arrangements and metering codes of practice. So, for example, the smart metering installation code of practice. And when it does go live in September, REC version 2 will supersede and replace the current transitional arrangements that are in place for the switching programme with enduring arrangements.
Right, so it's obviously then this coming months, and as the industry beds in further versions of the actual code itself, undertake user testing, and then different bits of rules are over time sort of assimilated into the REC. I guess that means there's going to be a lot of change for those that are impacted the most, I suppose, directly, which will be suppliers. And I guess one for you, Emma. Hello, Emma. How are you doing?
Hi, Ed. Hi, Kate. How are you?
Yeah, we're all good. Yeah, and just on that point, I guess around your views and thoughts around what the implications from a compliance perspective may be for
Sure.
suppliers in particular of these new arrangements.
Yeah, so you mentioned suppliers there. So I guess if we go to the gas and electricity supply licenses first, we've got standard license condition 14A. This is the customer transfer license condition, and this sets out that a switch must be completed within 21 days or 15 working days, whichever way you look at it. And obviously this is going to change with the new arrangements, and the change will be that rather than 21 days, it will be a switch should be completed within 5 working days. So that's the standstill period that comes into play before obviously suppliers transition to next day switching.
That's quite a change then in terms of the timetable, and I suspect that will have potential issues for suppliers.
Yeah, I think there are a number of license obligations to sort of talk about around this. Obviously, we've had the move to principles-based regulations as well. So yeah, on sort of the changes to the supply licenses, we were talking about, you're right, Ed, quite a big change from 21 days to 5 working days. Obviously, Kate also talked about next day switching for domestic customers. although Ofgem has said in one of its recent consultations that it doesn't plan to reflect next day switching in the licence immediately. But of course, there are other obligations that suppliers need to consider with the move to principles-based regulation that we've seen over the last few years. So I think suppliers obviously need to think about the standards of conduct, which is, the overarching principle of the supply licence, and that requires suppliers to treat customers fairly, the informed choices principle, and Ofgem's customer communications rules. So basically, if you're talking about switching, I think suppliers need to think about how they communicate the new switching timeframes so that customers are able to act in their own best interests and sort of get the best deal. And suppliers have to do this now in their communications, but I guess they need to consider a customer's preferences and characteristics when they are putting out any switching related communications. Because it's one change for the suppliers, but also translating that to consumers and getting that message across that things have changed as well.
So I guess that's a sort of license element to it, but I understand as well that sort of outside the license there are guaranteed standards. There's a performance, I think, to do with switching, which were introduced as part of this program. I just wondered if you've had anything to say around those elements as well.
Yeah, I think this has come up in quite a few of the consultations as well. The potential conflicts that might arise from the guaranteed standards of performance for switching. So just as a brief overview, Ed, these sort of came in two separate parts. So we had the first tranche of switching guaranteed standards come in May 2019, and then the second tranche came in May last year. So the guaranteed standards of performance, they're not set out in the licence as such, so they are set out in separate statutory instruments, and suppliers need to submit basically the metrics around their performance to each of the standards under Standard Licence Condition 5, which is around the provision of information. So that's sort of the background. And then if we look at the standards themselves, there are 7 switching guaranteed standards of performance. Some of these will be impacted by the new arrangements and others less so. So the ones that I guess won't be immediately impacted are the requirements around final bills to be issued within 6 weeks of a switch, and requirement to refund customer credit balances and the timings related to that. But if we look at the other standards, which require a supplier to make a £30 compensation payment when they don't meet it, at the moment, if a gaining supplier doesn't complete the switch within 21 days, which is, as I said before, set out in the licence, they'll be required to pay a £30 compensation. But of course, when the licence is amended to reflect the 5 working day standstill period, that standard will be redundant and be required amending or otherwise. And then the second one I just wanted to flag is sort of the guaranteed standard around erroneous transfers. So again, suppliers have to pay this £30 compensation when they switch the wrong meter point. And Ofgem has said that it doesn't plan to introduce any penalties beyond this for suppliers who want to switch faster than 5 working days. So this is a standard that looks to be in place. And let's say, for example, a supplier wanted to switch within the 5 working day standstill period. If they wanted to switch a customer sooner and closer to the next day aim, then they would still potentially be subject to a payment if they didn't meet that standard. So that's one that's going to endure the arrangements, I believe.
Okay, so there's updating of standards that are required, probably, if that's the decision to meet the new arrangements, and others then are indicated will kind of remain because they're still fit for purpose for whatever they're trying to achieve. I guess, given we're talking about switching in the retail space here as well, it's obviously not all about suppliers, given how heavily brokered the sector is. So obviously we have price comparison websites that are very active in the domestic market, and in the non-domestic market, we certainly have a high proportion of contracts that are brokered by third-party intermediaries. And I guess, I suppose it strikes me there are some threats and opportunities here I suppose the opportunity being if Ofgem's assessment that this could lead to increased levels of switching, then I suppose that could only be a good thing for those that are brokering contracts between suppliers and customers. I'm not sure though if it means anything around a system refresh or update for the brokers themselves having to move data around perhaps more rapidly than they do today. And maybe it's also an opportunity for auto switchers, I guess, particularly in times when suppliers are changing prices frequently. But I just wondered if you had any other thoughts or views, Emma, around what the implications perhaps could be for those parties.
I guess for that, we could potentially look to some of the recent developments we've seen from BEIS and also Ofgem. So, of course, we've got the Energy White Paper, which is very frequently referenced, and Ofgem's Forward Work Programme. So within these, of course, there are many proposals which cover the entire energy system, but here we're talking about some of the retail policy proposals within these documents. And I think the things to pull out here that might be relevant for switching, and particularly the role of TPIs, price comparisons websites in that process, are the plans for consulting on opt-in switching. So, we're in February now, so next month we're actually expecting a consultation on the design, testing and scaling up of opt-in switching by mid-2020. This is in the Energy White Paper, so they sort of refer to the switching trials that Ofgem has conducted over the years, noting that these trials in particular were the most successful at removing as many of the barriers to the switching process as possible. So this is something that looks like it's going to be taken forward and consulted on next month. And then we're also expecting another consultation again next month around how the current auto renewal and rollover tariff arrangements could be reformed. So the idea is to sort of reform these to facilitate greater competition. And part of these proposed reforms is set to include how opt-out switching could be tested.
Okay, interesting. And I suppose, given where we are at this moment in time and the impacts of COVID and the lockdown, I think it's true to say that a number of brokers and indeed suppliers, of course, are struggling, which amongst other things are probably going to impact on their ability to engage with a work programme such as this. So it'd be interesting to know if there's anything being done to improve that engagement or facilitate that engagement.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, Ed, particularly about getting TPIs on board in the process. So we've seen a lot of work over the past year or so via the Consumer Journey Forum, which was set up to sort of identify those issues that might impact the switching process, where price comparison websites are also involved. I've got a figure here from the CMA Energy Market Investigation on price comparison websites. So around 60% of domestic consumers do use a PCW. So you've said it before, absolutely right, that they are a big, they do play a key role. This week as well, we had some news that as the retail energy code companies sort of gearing up this year, they're starting their engagement activity. They confirmed recently that they'd be taking forward this work that was led by the Consumer Journey Forum. So they are going to take that, and the aim is to facilitate sort of more structured engagement between price comparison websites and suppliers, and they'll look at the implications of programme implementation. So I think that's a really positive development, actually. Of course, going back to one of the points raised earlier, we are in now user entry process testing this year, coming towards the end. So I think it's really important development as well as a really positive one.
Yeah, it sounds it. It sounds like the very correct thing to do. I suppose finally on this element of where we are at the moment, are there any other kind of risks or challenges you can foresee with the programme?
From my sort of experience of the programme so far, I guess it would be, and I think we touched upon this earlier, just sort of at the moment, suppliers, they're facing a number of issues, COVID-19 being one of them. Of course, we've seen the regulator respond to that when it sort of first came about, but obviously this has gone on for some time now, and suppliers are still having to focus on core business needs and COVID-19 responses. So of course suppliers are dealing with that, and that does I believe impact some suppliers' ability to sort of engage with these extra, some suppliers might call them extracurricular activities. And so I think that's always going to be a potential risk. And also at the moment we have issues with a volatile wholesale market with a number of market participants under financial strain. I believe the programme actually is monitoring these risks. So I think parties can be reassured that if it does become clear that resources can no longer be, directed to the programme for a period, that will be addressed. So I don't think it's anything to worry about.
Okay, great. And I suppose that leaves us really just to ask if you've got any views, Emma, on what you think a post-faster switching landscape may look like.
So I think, we can have a look to, beyond mid-2020 going forward. Kate, earlier in the podcast, she sort of pulled out the figures from Ofgem's impact assessment, sort of a 15% increase in switching in the first year, I believe. But I think we will, we will expect to see sort of increased switching among consumers. But I think it sort of goes back to some of the things we discussed as well about how is this communicated to the wider public, obviously bringing into play Ofgem's customer communications rules. And, they have a lot more flexibility now in how they communicate with customers. So, we might see some changes there and some sort of communications working better than others. And I think another point that I've been thinking about as well is at the start of this month, we also saw the announcement of the price cap increase of around £100 in October. And along with that increase, Ofgem did mention, didn't they, that customers should continue to shop around for a better deal. So I think there are a number of factors at play. The programme obviously being a big part in increasing that engagement, but there are other things that are happening in the market as well.
Of course, yeah. And I guess, I suppose my 2 pennies worth on this, it's been quite a long running programme, hasn't it? I think it was initially mooted back in 2014, I believe. And so we've come quite far now. But I suppose this is also in the context of other initiatives we've touched upon around white paper, proposals to increase switching, amongst other things. So I guess, the coming years of this decade, we'll see how the retail market changes. So I think that's probably where we'll wrap it up now, because we've been quite comprehensive there, talking about faster switching and some of the elements of retail energy codes. So I guess it just leaves me to say thank you to Kate and Emma. Thank you very much. And I don't know if one of you wanted to say a little bit more, perhaps Kate, about one of our products that is relevant to this.
Yeah, so we have our spring edition of the faster switching service that we offer, and this provides a walkthrough of the switching program, the retail energy code that we discussed earlier, and the associated schedules, as well as kind of details on the latest development of the program. So things like consultations, any decisions that have been made, and any announcements, but also kind of an overview of program meetings as well. So if you're interested in having a look, do get in touch with us.
Great, thanks, Kate. And very interesting and useful and timely product there. So I guess it just leaves me to say I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for listening, and hope you'll be in touch with us soon.